You gotta have the rabbit to make the scam work.
No, I love my husband. You've got me all wrong. You don't know how hard it is being a woman looking the way I do.
Yeah, well, you don't know how hard it is being a man looking at a woman looking the way you do.
I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
In a world where cartoons and people live together, an animated rabbit is wanted for murder, and it's up to a human private investigator to clear the bunny's name. As we celebrate our 200th episode, woo! We discuss the original Baby Yoda, how sadistic Tweety Bird is, and if a woman can shake the weasel. Then we find out if Who Framed Roger Rabbit stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have to say, do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut, and Alan says as a father blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have to say, do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have to say, do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody. My name is Alan Noah. You've heard me say it 199 times before. This is the 200th time. Welcome to the Test of Time podcast. Oh, I'm so excited, aren't you?
Yes, I'm excited too. I'm James Brief for the 200th time. Welcome to the Test of Time. And 200 down. All right.
I mean, this is awesome. All the haters. They said we wouldn't get past 182. They were very specific haters. I don't know why. But, dude, we did it. We are here in episode 200. And admittedly, this isn't how we thought we would be recording our 200th episode. I was figuring that we would be there together in person, not looking at each other on the computer screen. I figured we'd go out for a nice celebratory meal first. By that, I mean buffalo wings. I mean, what else would we have?
Absolutely.
I did get dressed up. I'm wearing my tuxedo t-shirt because this is a very special occasion. 4 years and 200 episodes we've been doing this. I mean, that's impressive. Like, can you, off the top of your head, think of something else you've been doing consistently every week for 200 consecutive weeks?
You know, I can't, and I could say I'm very happy we've done this because actually hanging out and doing this, it's been so much fun, and you know, it's sort of like a weight loss thing, like joining the gym. It's one of those you just have to do it. It's not really negotiable. It's just you have to do it. And on the incredible, like occasional off time that you can't do it one week, you have to do it twice. You have to do double, like to make up for it. And it's been consistent. We've done 200 weeks in a row of episodes. And I want to say congratulations to you, Al. Al has edited all of these. Thanks to you for making this 200 real fun episodes.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for putting together our show outlines every week and finding those movie clips that we play at the top of every episode. And hey, it's a team effort. We both put a lot of time and effort into this. And, I usually say this at the end of the episode, but because it's our 200th episode, I'll say it now. To everyone listening, do us a favor on this occasion of our 200th episode, write us a nice review on Apple Podcasts. We love seeing those. It means the world to us. Also, it means the world to us when you talk to us on social media. I feel like we've been getting a lot more tweets and Facebook posts and everything lately, and it's great, and we love it. I love reading all of those, so keep all of that coming. So on episodes 50, 100, and 150, I did this thing where I kind of totaled up all the times that I said a movie does stand the test of time and you said it doesn't, and I added it all up and everything. And this time, James, you went through the stats instead of me.
I'm not going to go through the stats. It's the same thing as it was. I'll quickly say yes. We agree about 3/4 of the time. We disagree with each other about 1/4 of the time. And just some stats that I thought was fun. Do you know what our favorite year to review is?
Did I quiz you on that in the 150th episode? I want to say it was like 1988 or 89 or something, maybe?
No. The most popular year is 1993.
Oh, okay.
1993, we had 16 films. 87, we had 14 films. And 97, we had 13. And just some other stats. Do you know the longest title of any film that we reviewed?
I would say the shortest was probably Cube. Let me think. It's got to be one with like a long subtitle.
Correct.
Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery.
Absolutely correct. Very good. Very
All
good.
right.
And I was trying to find out our favorite decade of films. And, we only reviewed one film from the 40s and we disagreed on it. You remember which one that was?
Dumbo,
yeah. We only reviewed one film in the 50s that we both liked.
Cinderella.
Yeah. And in the 60s, we disagreed. So technically we're split on the 60s. But that was only two films we reviewed in the 60s. You know what that was?
Night of the Living Dead and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly?
Very good. But by the 70s, we reviewed 16 films, the 80s, 80 films, and the 90s, 96 films. And by the aughts, we reviewed 10 films. So, it starts getting statistically significant. And we like the 80s movies the highest, at 78% of the ones that we reviewed. But the 70s films, we only liked 56% of them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I just think movies started getting better. I think the people like Steven Spielberg and Rob Reiner and John Hughes, these huge 80s directors, I found there was one interesting statistic. Do you know what these films have in common? We've got The Last Starfighter, Highlander, The Last Dragon, Cube, Galaxy Quest, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, and The Warriors. There's two things that these films all have in common. Do you know what they are?
They're all protected by copyright.
That's correct. And what else?
They are all movies that both you and I have watched and reviewed on this podcast.
That is correct. So the two that I was thinking of is those are all movies that you said do not stand the test of time. These are all movies that you had never seen before.
Oh.
And there's 40 of these films. And interestingly, if you had not seen a film before, you disliked it 85% of the time.
Really?
Yes. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of crappy movies in there, but there were 27 films that I had never seen before, and I said no to a majority technically, but I said no to 51.8% and yes to 48 point whatever percent. And I just say that's something interesting about you. There was a film recently that you saw that I was shocked. I think Primal Fear. Wow, he actually liked it, because you didn't like Scent of a Woman and you didn't like Galaxy Quest and some other ones. But I just find that interesting. Films that you haven't seen.
I mean, I guess maybe that's something I should explore with my therapist. I don't know. Or it's something that we should maybe delve into deeper in this podcast. Look, I think I have become more critical by doing this podcast. Certainly, there are certain times I'll just be watching a movie and, I'm like, I don't like this. And I get into my grouchy Allen mode. But I'd like to think that I give all of the movies a fair shake. I don't know, maybe the numbers don't really tell that story, but I certainly do try. All right, so I had an idea for another quick game to celebrate our 200th episode. Then we'll get into Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I promise. So here's the thing. A lot of the time when we record episodes, we do it because there's a new movie or TV show, a sequel, a reboot, a remake, something that's hitting theaters. And that's like our reason to do an old movie because there's a new version hitting theaters or TV screens in certain cases. So I thought it would be fun to run through all of the new versions of these movies and give like a really quick one sentence review if you've seen it. For movies that we haven't seen, we'll just skip those. We didn't talk about this. I'm totally putting you on the spot, but you think you can do that?
Oh, yeah, let's go.
Okay, here we go. Independence Day Resurgence.
I wanted a sequel to this film so badly, and I can't believe after 20 years they gave us that.
I didn't see it. Ghostbusters 2016, Ghostbusters: Answer the Call.
Very funny actors and actresses in that film with a very talented director, but not a funny script.
I agree. Disappointing considering all the talent involved. The Lego Batman movie.
I thought it was not only very funny, but actually had a quite insightful Joker Batman subtext to it.
I would say one of the better Batman movies, for sure. The live-action Beauty and the Beast.
I thought it was a very good live-action adaptation, if you're willing to accept the existence of these Disney live adaptations.
I thought it was wonderful and a welcome addition to the Disney canon. Alien: Covenant.
A decent film that's going to wind up being the sad ending to what started out as a fantastic franchise.
Didn't see it. Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Probably the best cast Peter Parker to date, and a very fun film with a great debut for Spider-Man the MCU.
My favorite Spider-Man movie, hands down. Wet Hot American Summer: 10 Years Later, the Netflix show.
I saw it. I don't remember it, to be honest, but I remember enjoying it.
I think I only saw the first couple episodes. It didn't grab me like the first Netflix series did. Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle.
Much better than I anticipated. I forgot how much fun Jack Black is.
Didn't see it. The kids saw it without me, and I was a little bummed because I kind of did want to see that. Cobra Kai, the YouTube series.
Really enjoyed it much better than I thought I would, except I am not digging the way it ended.
What, you mean season 2?
Yeah, but it's a cliffhanger, so, it's not the end of the series.
Right. Loved it. Loved every single second of it. It's phenomenal. Ocean's 8.
It was fine. It was like Ocean's 13 to me.
Yeah, I would agree that it was pretty good, and that's all. Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom.
Fine because of the charisma of Chris Pratt, but a weaker Jurassic Park entry.
Yeah, definitely not my favorite Jurassic Park movie. Just a lot of plot holes that were pretty distracting. The Predator.
This was not Predator 1 or even Predator 2 or Predator versus Alien. Alien versus Predator.
Didn't see it, not really motivated to. Creed 2, one that you and I saw together.
Ever since Rocky Balboa, the series has been fantastic, and I hope that was the ending that the series deserves.
I loved Creed 1 and loved Creed 2. I thought that was great. Aladdin 2019.
Liked it a lot more than I thought I would, but as a caveat, I saw it on an airplane.
I have not seen it and would very much like to. We've talked about this next one ad nauseum. So, give me the 6-word version. Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
Evidence that this trilogy, which had a lot of talent behind it, was not planned at all. That's my entire review of it.
Yeah, a fun movie that doesn't really stand up to any kind of scrutiny. All right, so that was just a real quick lightning round reviews. But let's move on to the movie for our 200th episode, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? This movie takes place in a world where animated characters like Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny are alive and they interact with people. When Roger Rabbit is accused of murdering the head of the Acme Corporation, a private investigator named Eddie Valiant tries to clear Roger's name. Eddie isn't sure who he can trust. Could Roger's knockout wife be involved? What about the head of Roger's movie studio? Or the sinister Judge Doom and his band of weasels? Valiant soon uncovers a plot that threatens his life and the life of every animated toon in Toontown. Yes, exactly. Now, I do not need to ask you if this was a big hit. I remember when this came out that this was a really big deal.
I mean, this film was almost like the Avengers at the time, because this was all the Warner Brothers cartoons versus the Disney cartoons. It's like being DC and Marvel coming together in a film, and they're not as big today. I can tell you, as a pediatrician, I have these stickers I give out, or Band-Aids, and the kids love SpongeBob. They know who Mickey Mouse is, but they do not know who Bugs Bunny is today.
I mean, I'll say the catchphrase. As a father, I can tell you, my kids don't know who Bugs Bunny is. Or actually, my son kind of does, but they didn't know who Daffy Duck or Porky Pig or Yosemite Sam or, Foghorn Leghorn or any of these characters are. They are not a big deal right now.
And I'll tell you, as a doctor, if you tell me "what's up, doc" in like a joking way, you are probably 30 or older. No one young is ever saying that expression. But back in this time, I mean, this was huge. It was a collaboration between Disney, specifically, I think it was their Touchtone, and Warner Brothers. And I've mentioned this name before, but this was actually a project spearheaded by Jeffrey Katzenberg. This was an effort to save Disney animation, because as we all know, didn't really do much in the 70s and 80s, and Katzenberg will eventually do The Little Mermaid a couple years later. But this was a huge thing to really get the ball rolling there. And this was the most expensive film ever produced in the 1980s, with a budget of $70 million.
Wow.
Yeah. It did very well when it opened up number one on June 24th, 1988, with $11 million. The film ended with $173 million domestically. So that's like 15, 16 times its opening weekend gross, and $329 million worldwide. So this was a fantastic investment for all the studios involved. I read that Disney got all of the merchandising rights to it. Warner Brothers got certain rights domestic and worldwide, but I mean, this was a huge hit. It won a bunch of Academy Awards, mostly technical awards. It won for Best Visual Effects, not surprisingly, Best Sound Effects Editing, and also won Best Film Editing. It also won a Special Achievement Academy Award for its animation direction. So, just throwing those out there, because technically this was a marvelous achievement in 1988.
Yes, and we've been talking about movies that we own on DVD in some of our recent episodes, because we're at home in quarantine and we're going through the DVD collections. I have this movie on DVD. I have a special edition of it, and I was watching the documentary, like the behind the scenes documentary this morning, and they were really going into the how of like how they made this movie. And I don't know, it's like 30, 40 minutes or so, but really, really interesting. And the big headline from it is no computers at all. All of this animation was drawn by hand. This was a very manually intensive process. When you said it was a $70 million budget, I read somewhere that the budget was initially slated at $50 million, and that was going to be too much. So they only greenlit the movie when it was going to be for $30 million, but clearly it more than doubled what they initially hoped to spend on it.
I saw this in the theater. I assume you did too.
I'm 99% sure that I did.
Right. It's interesting because there was actually one other Avengers-like mass grouping of cartoon characters across all of the intellectual properties in the 80s. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Not even a little bit.
All right, it was this incredibly cheesy 80s thing called Cartoon All-Stars to the Rescue. Do you remember this? It was an anti-drug kind of thing where all the Ninja Turtles and Alvin and the Chipmunks and the Smurfs and everyone got together and helped some kid like say no to some drugs or something.
No, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, it was this really cheesy thing, and this was going to be like the movie version of it, but they didn't call it like the all-star cartoon movie. It's strangely called Who Framed Roger Rabbit. someone watching this today who might not recognize 80% of the characters in this film might not know that Roger Rabbit is completely made up for this film. I mean, I think there was a novel or something that's based off of.
Yes, there was.
But I think for what they were going for, it was a smart idea. And the film opens in, you won't get the nuance if you don't know the old Looney Tunes and Disney 7-minute short. It shows the head of, this is a Tweety cartoon, or this is a Donald Duck cartoon. And it shows, here comes a Roger Rabbit cartoon. And it's like, what was it, like Baby Trouble or something?
Something like that.
It's this 1940s Chuck Jones kind of early animation, beautiful technicolor, and you have this funny rabbit who's like a zany-looking Bugs Bunny, and he's just trying to protect this baby who's almost walking into flames and blades and fire and the disposal, and it's a very funny cartoon.
Yeah, I mean, my kids were cracking up watching this part of the movie. On its own, it's very funny. It's, the slapstick thing where one cartoon character is fine and the other cartoon character is subjected to repeated injury and just gets hurt over and over and over again. And that is a recurring theme of the movie. My kids were cracking up. One thing that caught my eye from a test of time perspective is that in that cartoon, one of the things that hurts Roger Rabbit is an ironing board that's like built into the wall. Like, I've seen that in old cartoons. I've never seen that in real life. I guess that must be like an old-timey thing.
I've seen it. I've seen it in Europe in a lot of places. But I used to go to Ireland a lot for an old job.
Oh.
They're definitely still around. The fantastic thing is watching this film, knowing what it is, you actually see that this cartoon is very funny because it has every single cartoon trope in it. Every time Roger Rabbit is surprised, his eyes bulge out of his head, and a safe falls on top of his head. Well, in this case, it's a refrigerator falls on his head. After the refrigerator falls on his head, someone yells, "Cut!" and we pan out, and it turns out that this is just like any old Hollywood set, except this is some kind of universe where animated sets and animated characters just coexist in our world.
Right. And the director is yelling at Roger because he messed up his line. It's not really a line, but when the refrigerator falls on his head, he's supposed to see stars, but he's seeing the birds like around his head, like you'd see in those old cartoons when someone gets hit. And from there, we kind of move into the animation studio, which is Maroon Studio or Maroon Animation. And the head of the studio hires Eddie Valiant, who is played by Bob Hoskins. He's a private investigator to find out what's really troubling Roger Rabbit. There's rumors that his wife is cheating on him. So they hire the PI to find out and take some pictures of whatever Jessica Rabbit is up to.
Bob Hoskins plays it, but it was famously offered to Harrison Ford. The film was produced by Steven Spielberg, so of course he knew him from Indiana Jones. And Harrison Ford's price was just too high in 1988. Bill Murray and Eddie Murphy were also considered, but eventually went to Hoskins.
And Bob Hoskins is one of those people like Andrew Lincoln or Christian Bale who you get used to seeing him in American movies doing an American accent, and you forget that he is British. And when I was watching that documentary this morning, when you hear him talk, it's like, oh, right, you are not American. But he does like the voice of an old-timey 1940s PI very well.
Yeah, it works in this case because there is this accent we expect, and nobody in 1988 or today speaks like a 1940s Hollywood version of a 1940s private investigator. So
speak for yourself, buddy. Yeah, the dame walked in, see?
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of people speak like a Chicago gangster from Al Capone's crew. Exactly. He plays it very well. And it really establishes this world because I always remembered when I was a kid that he's so excited that he gets $50 for this job. And I thought that was fantastic. That was really well done of the scriptwriter because it's a great number that I have no idea whether that was a lot of money in 1947. Probably. He's sent to this club, the Ink and Paint Club, and I like that the password to get in was Walt sent me, obviously referencing Walt Disney.
Right. And the bouncer at this club is a giant gorilla. And Eddie says, nice monkey suit. And then the gorilla responds by saying, wise ass, which made my 10-year-old son smirk. Then Eddie goes in. The bartender there at this club is an octopus, like juggling 8 different drinks at once. Eddie orders a drink. He orders a scotch on the rocks and then immediately is like, I mean ice. And then when the drink comes out, it's actually rocks, not ice. That made me laugh. And the big centerpiece of the act as he walks in is Donald Duck and Daffy Duck, who are on stage together. And like you said earlier, this was a big deal then to have this IP from 2 competing companies sharing a scene. It would be like Superman and Spider-Man in a movie today. It just doesn't happen. It's not supposed to happen. The reason that Donald Duck and Daffy Duck are on screen together is because that was part of the licensing deal with Warner Brothers, that they couldn't make it seem like the Disney stars were bigger than the Warner Brothers stars. So both ducks are in the same scene. They have the same amount of screen time. They're both equally talented at playing the piano. Later on, there's a scene with Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny where they're both in it at the exact same time. And that's why that was done.
Yeah, and for me, I was a Donald Duck freak as a kid. He was my favorite character. So I'm curious, what did your kids think of this scene?
They liked it. They thought it was funny, but they did not know who Daffy Duck was. And fall of 2018, which seems like a million years ago, we took the kids for the first time to Six Flags Great Adventure. And, the characters at that theme park, it's Warner Brothers characters. It's the Looney Tunes. And we took some pictures of them with Daffy Duck and Yosemite Sam and whatever. And they were both like, who was that? They have no interest in Daffy Duck.
Yeah, that's interesting because when I saw this as a kid, I thought this was absolutely hysterical. And I really wanted to see Daffy versus Donald, and they just blow each other up. And I thought that was just a wonderful ending for the 2 of them. But that scene, I will say, not that it doesn't hold up. I think it's still a great scene, but that was one of the funniest scenes I had seen as a kid. And it's not as funny.
That's a very valid point. It is not as funny. But then we go into arguably this movie's most famous character, even more than Roger Rabbit, is Jessica Rabbit, who is this buxom, red-headed woman. Maybe there's one shot where you see both of her eyes, but usually she's got the hair covering one of her eyes. Her proportions don't make any sense at all. No human being could be alive looking like this. I think any woman would just topple over if they had these dimensions. She's really interacting with Eddie and Marvin Acme, who is, the head of Acme Corporation. He also owns Toontown. And earlier in the movie, there is some cartoon human interaction, but this is really where they take that to another level. As Jessica Rabbit's dancing, she kind of moves, her scarf over their heads and moves their hats around. This is really where they were showing off of what they could do.
Oh, yeah. And certainly if you were to make an update of this film today, you would have all the Disney Pixar characters and the Frozen characters and then DreamWorks Shrek characters, and you'd have the Despicable Me franchises. They'd all be together. This would be the family event of the season. Do you think they would possibly, especially with computer animation, put a Jessica Rabbit type character as possibly the focal point of this film? Do you think they would possibly do that today?
No. And I think it's a very valid point that this movie does sort of run into some risque territory. One with the murder that is the core of the plot, and also with some of the language, like I said, wise ass, which isn't a bad word, but you wouldn't see that in a Disney movie today. And yeah, Jessica Rabbit she's sexy, and there are jokes along those lines. I mean, the thing that Jessica Rabbit is doing with her illicit encounter with Marvin Acme is they're playing patty cake. That is just devastating to Roger Rabbit, but that's a reference to the adults. You're like, wink, wink, get it, what they're really doing. Ha ha ha. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's definitely way more adult themed than you would expect in a Disney movie, even though it's under the touch-tone label, like still.
Even in this scene, she's either from the 40s or the 30s, Betty Boop. She was this dark-haired Marilyn Monroe, sort of. The Jessica Rabbit is supposed to be, this ain't your daddy's Betty Boop. This is the modern 1988 version. Good for Zemeckis for getting this pass, but it doesn't go over the top either.
There are boob jokes. I mean, like later on when she's talking to Eddie, like her boobs kind of like bounce into him. And I think you even hear like a little like boom sound effect. I mean, your point's certainly well taken. But so Eddie takes the pictures of Marvin and Jessica playing patty cake. He shows them to Roger Rabbit, who goes berserk. At one point, Eddie hands him like a shot of bourbon. I think it's bourbon. Maybe it's scotch or some drink. And Roger turns every color and he like explodes kind of. And he leaves the office and says, Jessica and I will be happy again. The next morning, we find out that Marvin Acme has been killed. And so everyone suspects Roger Rabbit. And in this scene, we meet Judge Doom, played by Christopher Lloyd, and he is just menacing and evil right out of the gate. It's Christopher Lloyd in, full villain mode. He's got these 5 weasel henchmen, and he has a concoction called Dip, which is his invention to kill cartoons because, as you know from watching cartoons, and they even reference it earlier in this movie, you can drop a refrigerator on them 1,000 times and a cartoon will never die, but this concoction will kill cartoons.
It was very frightening watching this animated shoe be executed. It was the animated version of this, Mexican cartels of, boiling people in acid. There was this animated thing, and it's not like it was, a dead animated thing or, some animated spider. It was this happy little animated shoe, and we watch it get, dissolved alive slowly. It was pretty sadistic.
It is sadistic. Later on, Eddie has a conversation with Baby Herman, who, speaking of risque jokes, mentions that he has a 50-year-old lust and a 3-year-old dinky. He's like an old man who just looks like a baby. He's calling his assistant Toots or something like that. He's smoking his cigar, and he brings up Acme's will, which is this idea that Marvin Acme promised the Toons that he would leave Toontown to them if he ever died, but now he's dead and no one knows where the will is.
Yeah, I love Baby Herman. Baby Herman is the adorable baby in the opening cartoon of the film. And after they yell cut in that opening scene, the baby who was like, gaga goo goo, is suddenly like, hey, get me my cigar, will ya? And he's a drinking, cigar smoking older man. He's very funny. I really like that character. And he's not overused.
That's true. And now that I'm thinking about it, he says he has a 50-year-old lust. So this is a 50-year-old baby 30 years before Baby Yoda. He was the Baby Yoda before Baby Yoda.
That is true.
Yeah.
So we find out that Roger Rabbit, who's been on the run, he was hiding out in Eddie's office, and Eddie winds up agreeing to hide him. Some of the weasels, who are Judge Doom's henchmen, come over and, hey, where's Roger Rabbit, see? And the Eddie won't really give him up. But eventually, Jessica Rabbit comes into the office, and Valiant, he's convinced from Roger that Roger hasn't done it, but he thinks maybe Jessica Rabbit did it. And then comes the famous line that Jessica says, probably the most famous line in this film, when he accuses her of possibly being a murderer. She goes, I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way.
It's a very funny line. It's delivered wonderfully by Kathleen Turner, who does the voice and is not credited. I don't know why. I didn't see that as I was doing my research today of why she was uncredited.
Yeah, I did find it weird that she was uncredited. Usually it's for a small little cameo that they don't want to spoil for you, but it is weird.
Yeah, and Roger's not there when Jessica is talking to Eddie because he's hiding at Eddie's like girlfriend Dolores's bar. So Eddie goes back to the bar to talk to Roger, and then Doom and the Weasel show up, and the gag is that Roger's supposed to be hiding out like in this back room from the Prohibition days, but he can't help himself. He is out in the bar and like doing a song and dance number because that's what he does, is he makes everybody laugh. And then when Doom shows up, they run back into the other room, and Eddie's like, these guys are going to sell you out. They'll sell you out for a nickel. And Doom is offering like, I don't know, $50, $100, whatever it is. And everyone in the bar does keep quiet. They don't rat out Roger because he made them laugh. And that's like Roger's whole life philosophy, is that making people laugh is the most important thing in the world.
But there was a great test of time line in this scene. Judge Doom is asking and interrogating the bartenders like, give him up. Who's seen the rabbit? And one guy goes, yeah, I've seen the rabbit. And the guy goes, he's right here. And he points to an empty stool and he says, meet my friend, Harvey. Do you get that reference?
No.
That is a completely outdated reference, but in 1988, I think 40-year-olds, all the parents probably got it. It refers to a 1950s film, a smash hit called Harvey, starring Jimmy Stewart. And he's this like drunk guy who sees an imaginary rabbit. So it's a totally test of time joke that goes over people's heads. So it even went over yours, I see, because I happen to have heard of that movie.
I missed that one. But Doom has this plan to lure Roger out of hiding, which is by doing the bump, bada bump, bump, and then waiting for Roger to come out and finish the line of shave and a haircut.
Shampoo.
No, 2 bits.
2 bits.
Like, I've heard that before, that's just like an old-timey thing. I mean, I don't really know exactly where that's from.
I always heard it as shave and a haircut, shampoo.
No, it's shave and a haircut, 2 bits.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know my 1940s lyrics like you do. But Roger Rabbit crashes through the wall, 2 bits. And so Judge Doom grabs him. He's about to throw him into the barrel of dip. And Valiant's like, hey, doesn't he get one last request? How about a drink? But what it refers to, if you haven't seen it before, is the classic bit where Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, where it's duck season, rabbit season, duck season, rabbit season, then Bugs Bunny, rabbit season, duck season. I say duck season, and I say fire. And, Daffy Duck gets a shotgun right to his face.
Right, but then Roger takes the drink, and it's a callback to the scene earlier where he, like, explodes, and Eddie and Roger are able to escape, and there's a chase scene with Benny the Cab. I don't know if you've been on the Roger Rabbit ride at Disneyland, but it's basically like you go through Toontown in Benny the Cab. Actually, no, wait, that's not true. I think it's Lenny the Cab. It's like his cousin or something. But that's a fun chase scene. Eddie and Roger end up at a movie theater. Eddie tells Roger his backstory about how his brother was killed by a toon, and the two of them used to do all of this work with cartoons, and they used to go to Toontown all the time. But since Eddie's brother was killed by a toon, he doesn't really like cartoons, and he's lost his sense of humor, and he's become an alcoholic, and he has vowed to never go back into Toontown.
Yeah, and it's very odd to Roger because he didn't even really think a toon could be a murderer. And they're watching this Goofy clip. Did you recognize the little short that they were showing, the Goofy gymnastics short?
No, not at all.
Oh, it's an absolute classic. I had seen that one dozens of times as a kid. It's Goofy working out in his own home. It's very, very funny. It's called Goofy Gymnastics, and I do highly recommend it. And eventually Dolores catches up with them, and she has a good line where she says, I would have been here sooner, but I had to shake the weasels. The weasels being Judge Doom's henchmen.
But because shake the weasel means peeing. But it doesn't work if a woman says it, because a woman can't shake the weasel.
That's sexist.
Sorry. But from there, Eddie confronts Maroon, who's the head of the studio, and he thinks that he was behind this whole framing Roger Rabbit plot. But then Maroon is killed by someone, and Eddie sees Jessica Rabbit slinking away in the shadows. So he follows her to Toontown. And this is the first time in the movie that we see Toontown. We've heard about it before. Eddie has to drive through this like long, dark tunnel to get into Toontown. And it is basically just like every cartoon you've ever seen come to life.
An interesting early part of the script aspect was that when Eddie drives into Toontown, he was going to become animated himself. I have to say, I think that would be a horrible decision for the, let's say, the rules of this universe, but I'm glad they did not do that. Apparently, they did draw this sequence, but it was just thrown away.
They did, and I watched it on the DVD that I have, and it wasn't in this part of the movie. It was actually earlier in the movie where the weasels abduct Eddie and throw him into Toontown, and he comes out with like a pig head, like an animated cartoon pig head, and he has to like go into the shower and clean it off. And when he's in his office and Jessica Rabbit shows up and Eddie is shirtless, the reason is that because he was in the shower washing off that pig head in the original script. But even in that version of the script, you don't see Eddie in Toontown. You just see him kind of like dragged in and then kicked out. So it is still the reveal at this part of the movie where you finally do see Toontown. And it's sort of the reverse of everything else in the movie, where in the first 2/3 of the movie, it's cartoons in the human world, but now it's Eddie, who's a human, in the cartoon world. There's a gag where he thinks he sees Jessica Rabbit, but it's just this other woman who kind of sort of looks like her from afar. She's kind of like this like hideous version of her.
Yeah, that joke totally confused me as a kid, and I thought it was Jessica Rabbit, but maybe in Toontown she's much uglier or something. I didn't get it, but no, it's just supposed to be someone else that he thinks is Jessica Rabbit. The actual Toontown parts I didn't think were that funny this time around. I thought the animated gun that he had was pretty funny, that they shoot bullets and then right before the bullet gets to the target, it takes out a huge tomahawk and chops it in half. I thought that's very cute, but the actual Toontown wasn't as funny as I remembered it.
I will say that the Toontown land in Disneyland is kind of cool because it kind of looks like this, and it's kind of fun like walking around that sort of environment where everything's like pastel colored and, you know, all of the shapes of the buildings are really exaggerated. So that is a fun area to explore.
And there was one part of Toontown, this sequence when Eddie, he's falling out of a 50-story skyscraper. For some reason, some of the beloved characters are total sadistic people. Eddie grabs onto a flagpole, and for some reason, Tweety Bird comes out and plucks all of his fingers off, so he goes plummeting down to his death. And as he's falling further, you mentioned this part before, but Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse come up to him, and they say they have parachutes for themselves, and they don't have one for him, but they do have a spare, and he goes, all right, give me the spare. And they give him a spare tire, and it's a funny gag, but it seems honestly more like an Itchy and Scratchy kind of thing. Was Bugs Bunny doing that? I mean, to Elmer Fudd, maybe.
Yeah, this is totally on character for Tweety, who tortured Sylvester the cat, and Bugs Bunny, who tortured Elmer Fudd and Daffy Duck and anyone else who he encountered. I mean, those cartoons are violent as hell. And Itchy and Scratchy, well, I think they're more parodying Tom and Jerry, but like that kind of thing in these old cartoons where these characters just murder each other over and over and over again. Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, I mean, they are sadistic.
Yeah, I just thought that usually someone deserved it. Like it was Elmer Fudd or Sylvester was trying to eat Tweety. But I just thought it was a little bit out of character from what I remembered. But you might be right. Maybe they were just totally more sadistic than I remembered. But either way, they escape Toontown and Eddie is able to get back to his cab. But now at this point, he's separated from Jessica and Roger, who have now been captured by Judge Doom and his henchmen. So he finds Judge Doom and his henchmen holding Jessica and Roger Rabbit at the Acme factory.
Right. Basically, Judge Doom is behind everything. We kind of glazed over it, but earlier in the movie, there's talk about this new trolley system in LA. They make some passing references to the fact that you don't need a car in LA because LA has the greatest mass transit in the whole world, which is a joke now because LA has a terrible mass transit system and it's known for its deadlocked traffic. But Doom's plan is to take over Toontown because no one's been able to find Acme's will, and he's going to kill everyone in Toontown and then build freeways through LA. He's going to shut down the trolley because he bought it, and freeways are the wave of the future. And it's just like a lot of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge to the audience if you're familiar with modern day Los Angeles. And in order for Doom to carry out his plan, he's going to basically like shoot all of this dip at Toontown, which is right next door. But first, he's going to kill Roger and Jessica Rabbit, who are like hanging from a rope. And then Eddie has to save the day and kill all of the weasels. And he does it by killing them with laughter, which is something that Doom has said a couple of times in the movie. Like, you idiots are so busy laughing, you're going to laugh to death. And then Eddie, who's been the straight man this whole entire movie and doesn't crack a smile and he's depressed, now he starts doing a song and dance number and he's hitting himself on the head and doing all the cartoon Roger Rabbit-esque pratfalls. And the weasels actually start laughing themselves to death.
Yeah, this plan is fantastic. As I said earlier, there were some other people picked to be Eddie Valiant in this film. I could totally see Eddie Murphy being absolutely hysterical in this role. The thing about Bob Hoskins is that he isn't really this comedic guy, so it's out of character for Eddie Valiant to finally come around and do this. But I could see Eddie Murphy, playing curmudgeon-y and being annoyed the whole film and then being hysterical. But what I think would be very interesting, and I mean, he's a great actor, but I have never seen him come close to doing something like this. Can you imagine Harrison Ford doing this role where characters are laughing themselves to death from slapstick stuff that Harrison Ford would do? I wish I got to just see that parallel universe's version of this film, just for that one scene.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of interesting to imagine. Like, no, I really can't imagine that at all.
But the weasels are all dead, so it's Valiant versus Judge Doom. And there were a lot of people that were going to be the villain, but there is a part that only Christopher Lloyd could do. And he goes into this ridiculous rant of how wonderful the freeway will be, because he goes, billboards reaching as far as the eye can see. My God, it'll be beautiful. Especially that last part, the my God, it'll be beautiful, is in such, it's such a great line. And he is so, in this last scene, I was terrified of him as a kid. And I thought he was still very scary.
Yeah, Doom is scary. And I was a little worried that my daughter was going to get freaked out by this part of the movie. To her credit, she did not.
Yeah, it's a very scary death here. Well, there's really two deaths for Judge Doom, because there's a part where he accidentally, when he's trying to hit Valiant, he punches a hole through some super glue and then misses Valiant again when he punches, and his hand gets stuck on a steamroller and he gets run over and flattened by a steamroller as he is screaming in agony. I mean, this is not an easy death for a villain. And then he pops up and we realize, oh my God, he's a toon.
Right. Yeah. And then Eddie has some line about like, oh, I figured you were a tune when you were talking about your freeway plan because only a crazy cartoon could come up with something like that. Another wink to the audience. And not only is Doom a cartoon, but he is the tune that killed Eddie's brother. Dun, dun, dun.
Right. And this is also the second film we reviewed from this year where the villain is run over by a steamroller. Do you know the first one that we saw this in?
3 Men and a Baby.
Close. I will tell you that after the villain is run over by a steamroller, someone says, "My father went the same way."
Oh, yeah. The Naked Gun.
Yeah.
Colon from the Files of Police Squad. But after he is revealed as a tune and we see his like crazy eyes and everything, he gets killed by the Dip, his own creation. That's the end of Doom. But then like the truck that was holding Roger and Jessica Rabbit like crashes through the wall and goes into Toontown because this building is right on the border of the real world in Toontown. And I was thinking like, oh my God, there's so much dip everywhere. It's going to like still destroy Toontown. But no, they just turn on a hose and it all like goes down the drain and Roger and Jessica can come down and all of the cartoons come in through the wall from Toontown and everyone's happy. It's a big happy ending and Eddie is not going to be a grump anymore and he proves it by giving Roger Rabbit a big fat wet kiss. Roger had kissed him earlier, so it's a nice happy ending. Jessica and Roger are together, Eddie and Dolores are together, and cartoons and people happy together. Then it sort of does this weird like thing where Porky Pig says like, "That's all, folks," and it's like the first time he ever says it. It's like a weird way to end the movie. It's like the origin story of Porky Pig saying, "Beep-a-dee-ba-dee-ba-dee, that's all, folks."
Yeah, it is. And then Tinkerbell, closes it with her classic Disney close right there. So they both get to, close the movie. And that's the film. And, interestingly, there was never really a sequel. Do you remember when they used to show like, now before Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, there's going to be a quick animated short, Roger Rabbit in Tummy Trouble. Do you remember that stuff?
Yes, I do remember seeing that one before Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I know that there was another one before Dick Tracy. I believe there was a third. I don't remember what the other movie was.
Yeah, they did a third one for a film called A Far Off Place, which starred, if I remember correctly, a very young Reese Witherspoon and Ethan Embry. It's weird that Roger Rabbit, it never made another sequel, and it's just such a huge film that was very well received and won a lot of awards. They certainly had the desire and the audience appreciation of a character to turn him into today $1 billion franchise. It's just fascinating that Roger Rabbit just kind of disappeared. I read one little quirk that I happen to have played this game, but there was an old Game Boy, the original black and white Game Boy game called Bugs Bunny's Crazy Castle. It turns out that in Japan, it was called Roger Rabbit's Crazy Castle. But other than that, there was never really anything about this rabbit ever again.
I mean, that ride still exists in Disneyland and Tokyo Disneyland, I believe. But you're right. It is weird that it was like this sort of one and done thing, except for the fact that from the documentary I watched, like this movie cost a ton of money. It took a lot of time. I can imagine Robert Zemeckis like not wanting to do another one. I can sort of see that just from like a time and labor standpoint that they would just be like, yeah, not interested. But now that we've come to the end of the movie, James, what do you think? Does Who Framed Roger Rabbit stand the test of time?
I have to say that this film is not as good as when it was released, and James that saw this in the theater loved this film. Like the way you walk out of a theater and you're like, that was one of the best films I've ever seen. It was definitely great. But if there's ever a film that needs a remake, this is the closest one that it comes to. The plot, I'll say, of this film, it's not actually that good. This weird murder mystery, I find it a little bit confusing, but it's so well done. The special effects stand up today very well. They do get lucky in that all these characters are 2D, so that stands up very well in that they don't have to be three-dimensional characters in a two-dimensional world, which I do, by the way, think would be a very interesting sequel to this film. Roger Rabbit's a two-dimensional character, and everyone else that's big is 3D, so maybe he can't get jobs or anything. But that being said, I had a lot of fun reviewing this film. There was a film, I don't know if you remember, I wanted to mention this, but there was a film back when this film came out called Cool World. Do you remember that film?
Yeah, and I did almost suggest that we should do that next week as kind of like a back-to-back thing. But it wasn't streaming anywhere and whatever, we can do that down the road a ways. But yeah, it was the adult version of this.
Yes, but the difference between Cool World, which was a huge flop, if I remember, and this was that Cool World was 100%, if I'm not mistaken, of just made up new characters. And Roger Rabbit, it really does rely on the brand name awareness of these, we could almost say cameos of all these characters. And so in that regard, it really needs an updating. And I'll say if you do it with Minions and Elsa from Frozen, in 40 years, you're going to need another remake again. But it's a very, very nice film. I will say that this film does stand up because it's just a charming film. It works. It's funny. Bob Hoskins is, it's an interesting choice for this character who is a grump, so it works. I think some of the other casting choices might have been very interesting, but Jessica Rabbit is beautifully played by Kathleen Turner. I don't know why she's not credited. I think everyone's voice acting is fine, but hers is almost Academy Award nomination worthy. It was very good. So for me, yes, 1988's Who Framed Roger Rabbit stands the test of time. I would like to see a remake or a sequel done right, but just this film alone, what do you say, Al? Does 1988's Who Framed Roger Rabbit stand the test of time?
I think you bring up some interesting points. First off, I don't know that it needs a remake, and I don't know how you could do a remake, because right now I can't imagine Disney and DreamWorks, those characters sort of crossing into one movie, because I can't imagine either one of those companies licensing their characters to the other company. Disney owns so much IP at this point that they could just do their own thing where Mickey Mouse meets Bart Simpson meets Luke Skywalker meets Iron Man. But they don't really need to do that, and it would feel like a shameless plug. Also, they did kind of do that in that Disney Infinity game. It works okay in a video game. I think in a movie, it would just kind of fall flat. As we mentioned earlier, the appeal of seeing the Looney Tunes with the Disney characters, that just doesn't work anymore. Kids today are not at all interested in Looney Tunes. I did actually see, though, and it is worth pointing out, that there is going to be a new Looney Tunes show on HBO Max, that new streaming service that's coming at the end of May. So maybe Looney Tunes will have a new rebirth or something, and maybe kids will get really into Bugs Bunny and Tweety Bird and Sylvester. I don't know. I kind of doubt it, but you never know. They could have a comeback.
Oh, you're wrong about that. Space Jam is coming out. They're going to do Space Jam again with LeBron, and they're going to make Bugs Bunny cool again.
Yeah, look, the Space Jam sequel could make Looney Tunes big again. That does sort of bring me to another point I have, which is that this idea of cartoons and people interacting in one movie, that specific subgenre really hasn't stood the test of time, because you have Cool World, that flop, you have Space Jam, and that's really sort of it. On the other hand, you do have every single blockbuster movie nowadays is people interacting with animated characters. Chris Pratt talks to a talking raccoon and a walking tree in Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's not that big of a deal. You know, like when I see that in the movie, I'm not like, oh my God, Chris Pratt is talking to air. There's nothing there. Whoa! Like, I just take it for granted. Now, I take it for granted because of movies like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Jurassic Park and Terminator 2 that, you know, were the trailblazers and created this technology so that now in 2020 I could be like, there's Star-Lord hanging out with Groot and Rocket and whatever. It's just not a big deal. But yeah, I do think it's just not that impressive by today's standards. To your point about the plot, I 100% agree with you that the plot is really not that interesting. It's not a very good mystery. There's a villain named Judge Doom who's got 5 evil henchmen, and surprise, surprise, he turns out to be the main bad guy. Like, there's no twist at all. A twist would have been that Doom is really a super enthusiastic judge and maybe a little too quick on the trigger, but like really is a good guy and really wants to protect the Toons. Maybe the bad guy is Baby Herman. Maybe it really is Jessica. Maybe it's Roger Rabbit. Maybe he didn't frame himself. I don't know. Some kind of twist would have been nice, I think. I was disappointed watching this movie. I thought this was going to be a much better movie based on my memory of it. Watching the documentary on the DVD this morning did sort of make me like this movie a little bit more, though. It kind of gave me an appreciation for all of the work that went into it. And it is still a fun movie. It's still enjoyable. It is impressive in its own way, visually, and what they did. Also, I'm just feeling a little generous because it's our 200th episode and I want to be positive. So even though this movie is close, I am going to say that it does stand the test of time.
It's a well-made film if you don't know the characters. It's just that it's so much better if you do, which is a little bit of a shame because I think this film, it's going to age worse and worse to new generations. But it's still fun.
That's a fair point. But James, we have now officially recorded 200 episodes of our podcast. That is an epic, major milestone. I am very, very proud of both of us. I got you a little something. How can I give you this gift? Because we are not together.
Can you send it to me over America Online?
Check your email, James.
Wait a second. I just got something from Alan Noah.
That's me.
Happy 200th episode. And as an attachment,
Open
I
it
already
up.
love the name. It says Mars.pdf.
Uh-huh.
It says Planet Mars deed of title of 1 square acre.
On Mars. You are a Mars landowner. And what is the name on the deed?
You sent the deed to James Gladiator Brief.
Now you have a piece of property on another planet, which is like your dream come true, but it's also kind of a thing. Ha ha ha!
Ooh, the property is located at the south of Olympus Mons. You know what Olympus Mons is? Well, I'm about to tell you. It's the highest mountain in the solar system.
Well, and you've got prime real estate, so enjoy that.
Wow. You can come visit sometime.
Aw, thank you. I look forward to your first off-world party. But thank you for being my podcast partner for the last 200 episodes. I'm very much looking forward to the next 200, and we're going to start that batch with Uncle Buck. We saw that movie on cable the other day, and we recorded it, and Courtney really wants to show it to the kids, so why not? Let's watch John Candy and Uncle Buck next week. In the meantime, everybody, we want to hear from you. Tweet at us, Facebook us, Instagram us. We are at Test of Time Pod. Let us know your thoughts on Roger Rabbit, on the 200 episodes that we've done, on literally anything. We just love hearing from you. And yeah, don't forget to write us that nice review on Apple Podcasts in honor of our 200th episode. I don't mind asking.
200 down, let's do 200 more.
I mean, and not stop there either, but, we'll just set our sights on the next 200 for now.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe by episode 400, I'll be recording from home and you'll be recording from Mars. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. 200 episodes.
Woohoo! We did it.